In November 2008, Zimbabwe's central bank printed a banknote. The number on it? $100 trillion. A 1 followed by 14 zeros. You couldn't pay a single bus fare with it. A few months earlier, prices in Zimbabwe were doubling every 24 hours. In April 2009, the Zimbabwean dollar was abandoned. The country adopted the US dollar. That's not a story about Zimbabwe. It's the 58th time it's happened since 1900. And the mechanism that made it happen operates more slowly in every fiat currency on Earth. To understand how a country prints a $100 trillion bill, start with what hyperinflation actually is. Hyperinflation is not high inflation. It is a specific phenomenon with a specific threshold. In 1956, American economist Phillip Cagan wrote a doctoral dissertation that defined the field. Hyperinflation, in Kagan's definition, begins the month when inflation first exceeds 50%. At 50% monthly inflation, prices double every 51 days. At 100%, every 31 days. At Zimbabwe's 2008 peak, 79.6 billion percent monthly, prices doubled every 24.7 hours. At Hungary's 1946 peak, the worst case in recorded history, prices doubled every 15 hours. When prices double daily, money stops being money. It becomes a hot potato. People spend whatever they hold the moment they hold it because holding it costs. That panic spending accelerates the velocity of money. Faster velocity multiplies the inflation effect. Faster inflation accelerates the panic. A reflexive death spiral. Hyperinflation is rare. Of the roughly 200 active national currencies in the world, only 1 or 2 are usually in this state at any given moment. But it has happened in well-documented form 58 times since 1900. The conditions that produce it are the same in every case. Reading them is a discipline. On paper, the case for confidence in modern fiat currency makes sense. 5 clean arguments line up behind it. The empirical rarity argument: of 200 currencies, only a handful are in hyperinflation at any time. The mechanism is well documented, the warning signs are well documented, and developed democracies with independent central banks have largely avoided it for the past 40 years. The independence of central banks argument. The Bundesbank model, born of post-Weimar trauma, has been adopted by the European Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, Bank of England, Bank of Japan, and most major central banks. Independence is the structural firewall against political pressure to monetize debt. The credibility argument. Once a central bank has demonstrated it will fight inflation, Volcker in 1979, the Bundesbank consistently, the ECB after 2010, inflation expectations stabilize around the target. People stop preempting price increases, which prevents the velocity acceleration. The institutional architecture argument: modern governments have multiple firewalls, independent central banks, debt to GDP rules, IMF emergency facilities, currency board arrangements. Even troubled economies have many off-ramps before reaching Kagan's threshold. The reserve currency argument specific to the US dollar: roughly 60% of global central bank foreign exchange reserves are in dollars. This structural demand provides a unique buffer no other fiat currency has. 5 arguments. None of them wrong. This episode isn't an indictment of fiat money or central banking or modern monetary architecture. It's a structural observation about a specific gap, the gap between the confident-sounding rarity of hyperinflation and the documented historical record of 58 episodes in 125 years, including in modern industrial economies. Picture 4 cases, same mechanism, different decades, different continents, same death. Case A, Weimar Germany, 1923. In January, $1 bought 17,000 German marks. By November, $1 bought 4.2 trillion marks. A 1 kilogram loaf of rye bread that cost 163 marks on January 3rd cost 233 billion marks by November 19th. Workers were paid daily, then twice daily, so they could spend their wages before lunch made them worthless. Photographs from the period show citizens carting wheelbarrows of paper marks to the bakery. Children played with banknote bricks. Some Germans burned banknotes for heat. Paper marks were cheaper than firewood. The cause, war reparations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. The Reichsbank ran 132 printing companies, 1,783 presses, and 30 paper mills at maximum output to keep up with the obligation. The resolution, October 13th through 15th, 1923. New currency, the Rentenmark, backed by mortgage liens on industrial and agricultural land, 1 Rentenmark equal to 1 trillion old marks. Inflation broke within months. The political damage to the Weimar Republic, however, did not. Case B, Hungary, 1946, the world record. Monthly inflation peaked at 41.9 quadrillion percent. That's a 41, followed by 15 zeros percent. Per month. Prices doubled every 15 hours. The government printed a 100 quintillion pengo note, a 1 followed by 20 zeros. At the peak, the entire amount of currency in circulation in Hungary was worth approximately 1/10 of 1 U.S. cent. The cause, post-war reconstruction, Soviet occupation costs, war reparations, and active money printing. The resolution, August 1st, 1946. The pengo was replaced by the forint at a rate of 400 octillion pengo per forint. Case C, Zimbabwe, 2008. Already in the hook. Reserve Bank quintupled the money supply during 2007 alone. Mugabe's land reform program had collapsed agricultural output. Tax revenue evaporated. The printing press filled the gap. 2008 peak of 79 billion percent monthly was the second worst in recorded history. Resolution, April 2009. ZWD abandoned. Adoption of U.S. dollar and South African rand. There's a $100 trillion note now sells on eBay for roughly 40 to 100 U.S. dollars, substantially more than it bought in legal tender. Case D, Venezuela, 2016 through 2019. Annual inflation, 274% in 2016, 863% in 2017, 130,000% in 2018. The IMF originally projected 1 million. Citizens stopped counting cash. They weighed it on grocery scales. The currency lost roughly 99.999% of its dollar value in 3 years. 7 million Venezuelans left the country between 2014 and 2024, the largest population displacement in Latin American history. Resolution, ongoing de facto dollarization. By 2024, an estimated 60% of transactions in Caracas occurred in U.S. dollars rather than bolivars. 4 cases, 4 different decades, 4 different political systems, 1 mechanism. Print money faster than the economy grows. Cross Kagan's threshold. The currency dies. This episode is sponsored by my own private community. If watching 4 currencies die made you want to think harder about your own, this is built for it. A community where I work through over 100,000 breakdowns, how to read currency risk indicators, how to think about non-fiat hedges, how the people who lived through Weimar and Zimbabwe actually preserved wealth. Not alone with a YouTube video, together, link is in the description below. All right, back to the diagnosis. Most people picture hyperinflation as a strange foreign event, other countries, other regimes. Sometimes that's true. Underneath that, 3 structural insights, 3 different centuries, name what is actually happening in every case. Mechanism 1. In 1911, American economist Irving Fisher published The Purchasing Power of Money. He wrote what is now called the quantity equation. M times V equals P times T money supply times velocity equals price level times total transactions. Translation: holding the size of the real economy roughly steady. If you double the money supply, prices roughly double. Print 100 times more money, prices rise roughly 100-fold. It is not a theory, it is an accounting identity. The math is inescapable. Mechanism 2. In 1956, the same Phillip Cagan extended Fisher's framework. He gave hyperinflation a precise threshold, 50% monthly inflation, and he documented something Fisher's equation didn't fully capture. When monetary expansion crosses a certain speed, v, velocity, stops being roughly constant, it accelerates, sometimes spectacularly. People stop holding cash for any longer than they have to. The same dollar circulates 5, 10, 50 times more often than before. Velocity acceleration multiplies the inflation effect of money creation. This is what makes hyperinflation different from regular inflation. It's not just printing more money. It's that printing money beyond a threshold triggers a behavioral cascade, a bank run on the currency itself, in slow motion at first, then very quickly. Mechanism 3. Steve Hanke, professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins, maintains the modern empirical record. The Hanke-Krus hyperinflation table documents every confirmed episode meeting Kagan's threshold since 1900. Currently 58 cases: Hungary, Germany, Zimbabwe, Yugoslavia, Greece, Venezuela, Argentina multiple times, Brazil multiple times, Russia, Turkey on the borderline today. The pattern Hanke documents. Every confirmed hyperinflation has resolved through one of three paths: currency replacement, dollarization, external anchor. No fiat currency has ever crossed Kagan's threshold and recovered while keeping the same name and unaltered structure. Three mechanisms, 3 different centuries, one repeating pattern. Fisher said the math forces it. Cagan defined the threshold. Hanke documented every time it has crossed. Once you see the mechanism, the rest of the story is what it does to one household, one country, and the political system that sits on top. At the level of one household, imagine a Zimbabwean school teacher earning 200,000 Zimbabwe dollars a month in early 2007. 2 years later, after multiple monetary redenominations and continued printing, that same nominal salary is essentially zero in real terms. Savings in the bank evaporate completely. Pension, life insurance, fixed-rate contracts, all destroyed. By the time you withdraw cash, the cash is worth less than the trip to the bank. What survives? Real estate, hard goods, foreign currency held in advance, skills, and the ability to leave the country. What dies? Trust in the institutions, in the government, in the future. Every Zimbabwean household experienced a near-total wealth wipeout in 24 months. The middle class was reset to zero. At the level of one country, an estimate. Hungary, 1946. About 80% of GDP destroyed in 12 months. Germany, 1923, about 70% in 18 months. Zimbabwe, 2009, about 75% in 24 months. Venezuela, 2019, about 60% in 36 months. These are estimates compiled from the Hanke-Krus table and World Bank historical data. The exact destruction is hard to measure because the unit of measurement is itself collapsing during the event at the level of the political system. Hyperinflations are correlated with political system collapse. Weimar's hyperinflation contributed to the conditions enabling the rise of the National Socialists a decade later. Argentina's 1989 episode unseated President Alfonsín. Yugoslavia's 1990s hyperinflation accompanied the country's dissolution. Venezuela's hyperinflation has correlated with mass migration, regime entrenchment, and ongoing political crisis. The pattern: when a currency dies, governments often die with it or transform fundamentally. Hyperinflation is not a financial event, it is a civilizational event. Once you see the mechanism in full, money stops looking like a thing. It starts looking like an agreement. A dollar is worth a dollar because everyone in the system agrees it's worth a dollar. The agreement holds up until enough people stop agreeing. When that threshold is crossed, the agreement collapses with stunning speed. Cagan's velocity acceleration in real life. The US dollar has held its agreement since 1792. It has lost roughly 97% of its purchasing power against 1913 prices. But that erosion has been gradual, about 3% per year on average. It has not crossed Cagan's threshold. It has the unique buffer of being the global reserve currency. The euro has held since 1999. The Swiss franc since 1850, the most consistently stable major currency in modern history. Every one of those currencies has lost the majority of its 20th century purchasing power to inflation. The difference between gradual erosion and hyperinflation is a difference of velocity, not direction. For an individual participant, this means three things. There is no exit from currency risk. Holding cash is a bet on the issuer's monetary discipline. Holding any single currency in concentrated form is a concentrated exposure to that issuer's political fiscal trajectory. There is no immune economy. The 58 cases include modern industrial democracies, agricultural economies, post-war reconstructions, oil-rich petrostates, and former communist economies. The conditions are universal, not regional. There is no warning bell that everyone hears at the same time. Steve Hanke notices early. Most people don't. By the time mainstream media is reporting hyperinflation, most of the local currency wealth is mostly gone. That doesn't make hyperinflation imminent for the dollar, the euro, or the franc. The institutional defenses against it are real, well-funded, and well-tested. The point isn't fear. The point is that currency awareness, what proportion of your wealth sits in any single fiat, what alternatives you maintain access to, what assets hold value across regimes, is a discipline, not a paranoia. Recognition is the first move. 3 operational rules to take from this. Rule 1. Concentration is the risk that becomes total. If 95% of your wealth is denominated in one currency, you are running concentration risk on that currency's issuer, not paranoia, arithmetic. Diversification across currencies, across asset classes that hold value across regimes, real estate, productive equity, hard goods, modest cryptocurrency exposure, if it fits, is what every household that has lived through a currency death wishes they had done in advance. Rule 2. Watch the deficit monetization indicator, not the inflation print. By the time the inflation rate is in the news, the velocity acceleration is already underway. The earlier signal is the one inside the central bank balance sheet. How much of new government debt is being absorbed directly by the central bank rather than by foreign and domestic investors? When that ratio climbs sharply, the warning is on. Steve Hank's tracking is public. So is the Federal Reserve's H4.1 weekly release. The information is free. Rule 3, the exits close in order. Capital controls come first. Restrictions on moving money out of the country. Then price controls. Caps on what merchants can charge, then currency redenomination, slicing zeros off the bills. Each step is a public signal that the exits are narrowing. Reading them is reading the schedule. These are operational rules, not philosophical ones. They don't fix the system. They give you a way to live inside it without being caught flat-footed if the system stops working. In November 2008, Zimbabwe's central bank printed a $100 trillion bill. A few months later, the currency was abandoned. 5 months after that, the same $100 trillion note was selling on the global collector's market for 40 to 100 US dollars, more than the bill bought in legal tender, less than the cost of the paper. 8 billion people now wake up every morning inside an economic system whose money is structurally an agreement. The agreement holds up most of the time in most places for most of history. 58 times since 1900, the agreement has stopped holding. Fisher wrote the equation in 1911. Cagan defined the threshold in 1956. Hanke maintains the empirical record today. The mechanism is unchanged. The participants change, the math doesn't. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe. There's a lot of math worth understanding. Numbers don't lie, but they don't explain themselves either.